A spinning heel sliced through the air, fast full force, connecting squarely with the jaw of a royal guard in full uniform. Gasps rippled through the crowd as cameras clicked and silence fell like a dropped curtain. But the man didn't fall. He straightened his spine, fixed his hat, and walked away, leaving the kicker to drown in the silence he just created. Hi, everyone. Today we're diving into a story that starts with ego, but ends with something far more powerful. A story about two men, one trying to be seen and one who stood tall by not reacting at all. One moment, one strike, and the silence that followed would ripple further than any punch ever could. This isn't just about martial arts. It's about control, about presence, and how in everyday life strength is so often mistaken for noise when the real kind shows up quietly. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Let's begin. Travis Dean didn't grow up angry. He grew up invisible. Dayton, Ohio strip malls, chain restaurants, and corners where the streetlights blinked too slow. His mom worked at a call center and his dad drove city buses for 23 years straight. People worked hard. People got by, but nobody looked twice at the quiet kid who kept to himself, unless he messed up. So Travis learned early, if they only see you when you cause a scene, then maybe causing a scene wasn't such a bad thing. By the time he was 15, Travis had his first black belt and a shelf full of medals that meant more to him than birthday cakes or summer breaks. Martial arts gave him form. It gave him applause. That meant everything. He competed through his 20 state tournaments, small circuits, even made a semi-final in Chicago that earned him a few articles in regional magazines. But by 34, he was back home running a modest dojo behind a laundromat next to a vape shop. His name was stenciled on the glass, Dean's Martial Arts Academy discipline. Focus. Honor. But the truth was, the classes were mostly 10-year-olds whose parents needed an hour off and a few men in their 50s trying to reclaim their prime. Travis kept telling himself it was enough, but something inside him had started to itch. At night, he'd scroll through videos on his phone, fighters from Seoul drills in Tel Aviv, ceremonial training clips from Tokyo, London, Istanbul. That's how he first saw Elias Mensah. The video wasn't even dramatic, just a 60-second silent reel. A royal guard standing outside St. James's Palace in London, still as stone, red tunic, tall hat, broad shoulders, darker skin than most of the others. But it wasn't the uniform that got Travis. It was the eyes, focused, calm, powerful, like he knew how to take up space without ever lifting a hand. The caption read, Lieutenant Elias Mensah, Royal Guard, trained in multiple disciplines, American-born, selected for UK ceremonial duty. Travis watched it 3 times in a row. It wasn't jealousy at first. It was fascination, then frustration. How could someone just stand there and still look more powerful than anyone Travis had ever seen throw a punch? For days, Travis couldn't shake it. The silence, the presence. Elias wasn't famous, but he didn't need to be. He had weight, the kind that didn't come with medals, and Travis hated how much it got to him. Then the opportunity came. Buried in a comment thread of a martial arts forum was a post call for participants. International Cultural Demo Event. London location, St. James's Palace. Date April 14th. Open exchange. Limited spots. They were looking for select practitioners from different countries to join Royal Guards in a ceremonial demonstration of discipline and style. Controlled, respectful, filmed for public viewing. It was about cultural unity. Honor, no competition. But Travis didn't see a peaceful exchange. He saw a platform. He called Ruben Knight, an old friend from the tournament circuit who now ran a Krav Maga gym in New Jersey. Ruben had connections. He'd trained with some folks who worked UK private security. You sure you want to do this? Ruben asked, skeptical. It's not a tournament, no winners, I know, Travis replied. I just want to be part of it. A few favors, a few emails. 1 week later, Travis was on the list. He didn't tell his students, didn't post on social media. He just packed his GI, his belt, and bought a cheap one-way ticket with layovers in Philly and Dublin. The moment he arrived in London, jet-lagged and wired with nerves, he checked into a modest hotel 2 blocks from the palace. His room had one window facing an alley, and a mirror screwed to the wall above the desk. That's where he stood the night before the event, staring at himself practicing his bow. He told himself it was about respect, but he was rehearsing something else. The moment. His moment. He didn't say it aloud, but deep down, Travis had already decided he wasn't flying across the ocean to blend in. He was going to be remembered. The morning of the demonstration was crisp with a breeze that fluttered flags and rustled the leaves of the few trees that lined the square near St. James's Palace. Tourists were already gathering by 9 a.m., phones in hand, some sipping lattes, others wearing headphones and oblivious to the history unfolding around them. Children on school trips clung to laminated maps. Martial artists from Japan, Brazil, Kenya, and the U.S. slowly warmed up across the courtyard, stretching limbs, adjusting uniforms, exchanging respectful nods, but not many words. Travis Dean arrived early, a duffel slung over one shoulder, his white GI clean and pressed. His belt was looped 3 times, tied with precision. He wore sneakers until the mat, his feet already tingling with adrenaline. As he stepped into the designated warm-up zone, he scanned the perimeter until he found him. Lieutenant Elias Mensah stood with a group of royal guards near the temporary stage. Fully dressed in ceremonial uniform, he looked like a man carved out of time hat, straight coat, buttoned hands, gloved and steady. He was still, not stiff still, like a mountain holding posture, like he belonged to a different kind of power. Travis felt the twist in his stomach again. A few martial artists whispered near him. One murmured, "That's the guy from the viral clip, the one who doesn't blink." Another added, "He was stationed in Afghanistan, I think." Then handpicked for this role, Travis said nothing, just kept his breathing steady and his shoulders loose. At 10:30 sharp, the organizers began calling names. Demonstrations would be in pairs, symbolic light controlled, different styles meeting in unity. No ego, no full contact. But Travis wasn't listening, not to that part. He heard something different. No spotlight unless you make one. The coordinator called his name. "Dean, you're with Lieutenant Mensah. First pair." Travis's heart kicked in his chest. The others turned toward him. He nodded once hard and stepped forward. His sneakers tapped the pavement as he approached the temporary platform. Elias turned and met him halfway. The bow was brief. Elias lowered his head in a full, respectful gesture. Travis's was shorter, sharper, mechanical. Then they took their places on the mat. The crowd hushed as cameras clicked. A few tourists who didn't even know what they were watching whispered to each other, sensing tension. From the outside, it still looked ceremonial. But something was off. The air carried weight. The kind of weight you only notice in the seconds before something irreversible happens. They began with open stances. A slow exchange, palms raised, no fists, mimicking styles. Travis launched a low sweep. Elias blocked with a calm parry. Elias countered with a slow circular movement, barely brushing Travis's shoulder. They nodded once. Respect. For a moment it was clean. Then Travis shifted. A sliver of weight transferred into his back foot. He pivoted. Elias saw it. His eyes flickered just slightly. His feet realigned. Still composed. Then it came. A spinning heel kick. Fast. Hard. No pullback. No rehearsal. The crowd gasped before the impact landed. Travis's heel cracked against Elias's jaw with a sharp pop. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in a peaceful demonstration. Elias's head jerked. His body rocked. He stumbled 2 steps back. Someone dropped their phone. Another tourist covered their mouth. But Elias didn't fall. He reached up, adjusted the brim of his hat, straightened his spine, fixed his coat, and walked off the mat. Not a word. Not a glance back. Just silence. Travis stood frozen, chest heaving, heart pounding in his ears. There was no applause. The event coordinator rushed forward, face pale. "We'll pause briefly for schedule adjustments," he stammered into the mic. But everyone knew what had just happened. Guards murmured to each other. One leaned toward a superior officer. Martial artists looked away, uncomfortable. Travis returned to the waiting area. One of the Brazilian capoeiristas stared at him and said quietly, "Why'd you do that?" It wasn't a match. Travis didn't answer. He sat down, untied his belt with hands that shook, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. Shame, or maybe confusion. It didn't matter. The noise had already started. By the time Travis made it back to his hotel, the first video had hit TikTok. No context, no captions, just slow-motion footage of the kick, The twist, the snap, the stumble. Elias's expressionless face as he absorbed the strike and walked away. The clip spread like a dropped match in a dry field. Within hours, dozens of angles emerged. Instagram, Twitter martial arts forums. Some tagged it as Palace Brawl, others labeled it Dean versus the Guard. But the most viral version, it was set to dramatic music and simply titled, "This Wasn't Supposed to Happen." Travis sat in bed, the curtains closed, scrolling. He laughed at the first few comments. Yo, that guard got clocked. Dude went Mortal Kombat on a Royal Guard. He ate that like cereal. But the deeper he went, the heavier it felt. That was out of line. Not martial arts, just ego. Imagine trying to humiliate a soldier in uniform. This wasn't skill. This was desperation. Even his old coach from Ohio posted control as strength. Travis forgot that. He turned off his phone. But the silence didn't help. The next morning, 3 local sponsors had already emailed to suspend collaborations. 2 students from his dojo texted that they'd be taking a break. One said his mom didn't want him learning from someone who hits people in peace ceremonies. Travis stared at the hotel ceiling. He had trained for power. He had trained for speed. But he had never trained for consequences. Lieutenant Elias Mensa sat in a narrow side room just off the main hallway of the Guard's temporary headquarters. His ceremonial uniform, still buttoned to the collar, looked untouched. The bruise along his jaw hadn't bloomed yet, not visibly, but the tightness in his throat was there, not from pain, from the aftermath. An officer had quietly informed him that morning he was being relieved from ceremonial duties for the foreseeable future. Not as a punishment, not publicly, but the optics weren't clean. You did nothing wrong, they said, and they meant it. But even silence can become a headline if enough cameras are rolling. Elias had simply nodded. He didn't protest. He understood the institution. He had worn many uniforms in his life, each with its own code. Some rules you lived with, others you carried. When the young guard, a recruit barely 19, sat beside him that afternoon and finally asked, "Why didn't you hit him back?" Elias didn't respond at first. He just kept staring ahead at the scuffed floor tile. Then after a long moment, he said softly, "Because then it would have been about me." The kid blinked. Wasn't it already? Elias turned his head, his voice steady. No. That moment was his. What comes next? That's mine. Across the city, in a rented room filled with stale air and silence, Travis Dean sat with his phone face down on the bed. He hadn't turned it back on since last night. The noise had followed him even when the screen was dark. His inbox was full. Comments, DMs, articles, even a Reddit thread dissecting his body mechanics. One post stood out. A martial arts coach from Phoenix had shared the clip with a caption that simply read, "When the mind is loud, the body can't be still." Another wrote ego in a gi. He didn't sleep, couldn't. He replayed the moment over and over in his head. The spin, the crack, the look on Elias's face, not pain, not even surprise. Just a kind of disappointment so quiet it was deafening. 3 days passed before Elias made a move. Not on camera, not in an interview, just a post. No hashtags, no tagging, no flair. It was a simple typed message, plain, white background, black text, just words. Presence isn't posture, it's responsibility. Some moments are yours to control, others are yours to carry. Strength doesn't shout, it stays. The post hit 100,000 shares in 24 hours. Boxers reposted it. Aikido schools printed it on their bulletin boards. A high school teacher in Atlanta read it aloud to her morning class. And Travis, he saw it too. He read it 3 times in a row. He didn't comment, didn't click like, but it did something to him. It pierced deeper than any of the flashy breakdowns or sarcastic tweets. Because that post wasn't about defending himself. It wasn't about blame. It was a mirror, and Travis couldn't look away from it. Back in Ohio, his dojo had grown quiet. A few loyal students still showed up. The others faded away with quiet texts or no notice at all. He didn't chase them. He couldn't. He still ran the drills, still cleaned the mats. But his voice had changed. It wasn't as loud. His cues weren't about speed or dominance anymore. He stopped saying strike first. He started asking, "Why do you need to?" One night he typed a message to Elias. 3 different versions. Didn't mean for it to go that way. Wasn't personal. hope you're okay. Each time he deleted it, because they were lies. He had meant it. Every inch of that kick came from a place he didn't want to admit existed. The place that hated how calm Elias looked. The part of him that needed to be seen louder than a uniform, louder than history. He didn't know what to say, but he knew what he had to do. It was a Wednesday evening when Travis walked into the Camden Martial Arts Collective, a converted garage gym tucked behind a chicken shop in North London. No social media page, no branded merchandise, just mats, rope-wrapped poles, and sweat-stained gear stacked in crates. Word was Elias trained there sometimes. Off-duty, quietly. Travis didn't call ahead. He didn't wear his GI, just sweats, a t-shirt, and the heaviest breath of his life. He waited. A few younger fighters glanced at him. Nobody said his name. Nobody brought up the video. That was almost worse. Then the back door opened. Elias stepped in bag, slung over one shoulder, hoodie on posture, relaxed but unmistakably aware. He saw Travis immediately, paused. Their eyes met. Not confrontational, just present. Travis stood slowly. He didn't reach out, didn't smile. "I shouldn't have done it," he said, voice low. Elias tilted his head, eyebrows raised just slightly. Which part? Travis looked down. The kick. The moment. All of it. Elias nodded once. "You did it because you thought it would make you feel bigger." Travis didn't deny it. He didn't try to excuse it. "You trained to control your body." Elias continued, "But not your need." That landed like a quiet punch to the ribs. Not because it hurt, but because it was true. Travis exhaled. "I didn't come here to spare," he said. "I came to apologize. In person. Not for cameras. Not to fix the press. Just..." He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elias looked around the room. Fighters were mid-drill, pads hitting pads, rope skipping, breath steady. He turned back to Travis and said quietly, "You hit me harder with that." Then he stepped to the side and gestured to the open mat. "You're here," he said. "Might as well move." They didn't bow. They didn't square off. They just moved. Controlled drills, soft contact, breathing, repetition, a kata here, a foot sweep there. No tension, no proving. After 30 minutes, they stopped. Travis sat against the wall, sweat soaking through his shirt. His hands trembled, not from strain, from release. "You ever feel like you don't know who you are without the applause?" he asked. Elias crouched beside him, calm. "I used to," he said, "until I realized applause is just noise. Purpose is quiet." Travis let that sink into his chest. Then he asked, "What happens now?" Elias stood and said only, "That depends on what you do when no one's looking." And he walked away. No ceremony, no social media photo, no handshake shot for clicks. Just presence. The flight back to Ohio was quiet. Not in sound, there was still the hum of the engine, the baby fussing 3 rows back, the in-flight announcements, but in him. Travis Dean sat by the window, hands folded in his lap, watching clouds pass like thoughts he no longer needed to wrestle with. He didn't feel redeemed. Redemption would have been too easy, too clean. What he felt instead was the ache of truth, the kind that doesn't go away with time. It settles deeper, reshaping everything it touches. Back at his dojo, things hadn't magically repaired themselves. The Thursday class that once filled the mat with a dozen students now had 5. A couple of kids, one middle-aged man who worked construction, a woman in her 40s who never said much but showed up rain or shine. Travis didn't rush to advertise that he was back. He didn't post a single update. The studio lights stayed dimmer, the music softer. He swept the floor by hand, cleaned the mirrors more than he used to. Not because they needed it, but because he did. He started the first class with a bow that went a little longer than usual. Not dramatic, just sincere. The kids giggled a bit. Kids always do, but they followed his lead. Instead of launching into drills or shouting through combos, Travis began with breathwork. Simple, rhythmic, focused. He spoke slower, moved more deliberately. No more barked instructions, no more racing through forms just to keep up intensity. That day the lesson was about posture, but not the way most people think about it. He said your body tells a story before your words do. Make sure you're telling one you're proud of. They didn't quite get it. Not yet. But they would. And he He was beginning to. He removed the poster near the entrance that advertised his championship medals, took down the framed photo from a tournament in '09. In their place, he hung a single quote printed on plain paper. Strength doesn't shout. It stays. No name, no credit, just the words. Days turned into weeks. Some students came back, some didn't. But those who returned noticed something different. Travis still had fire, but now it was aimed inward. He didn't yell. He asked, "Why did you move that way? What made you choose force over redirection? What do you feel in your stance right now?" He stopped trying to be impressive and started being present. One evening, he walked into the studio just after sunset. The windows glowed warm from inside. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, was waiting on the bench near the door, swinging his legs belt tied in a messy knot. When Travis opened the door, the boy jumped up and asked, "Sensei, are we still doing class?" Travis smiled small, real worn in. "Yeah," he said, "we are." That night they practiced quietly. No high kicks, no sparring, just balanced drills and breathing patterns. At the end, as the students bowed out and the parents waited outside, the boy lingered. He looked up and asked Sensei, "What do you do if someone hits you first?" Travis paused, the question hanging heavier than expected. For a second, his breath caught. Then he crouched to meet the boy's eyes. "You decide," he said, "if you want to win a moment or live with yourself after." The boy nodded like he understood. Maybe he didn't, but one day he would. 3 weeks later, halfway around the world, something shifted back into place. It was a crisp morning in London. Sky pale gray, the kind of cold that didn't bite, just lingered. Tourists were already gathered in front of St. James's Palace cameras, ready children pointing guides explaining the significance of each guard movement. The palace routine hadn't changed. Boots struck stone, flags lifted, choreography passed down through generations played out like clockwork. But for a few people, those who followed the story, who watched the footage, who read the post this day, meant something different. At precisely 11:00 a.m., the rotation began. Guards marched out with perfect rhythm steps in sync, eyes straight, and there in full ceremonial uniform, chin-high posture, poised walked Lieutenant Elias Mensa. No fanfare, no press release, no applause, just presence. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Isn't that the guy who—" But nobody finished the sentence, because there was nothing more to say. Elias didn't look at the crowd, didn't smirk, didn't wink. He simply stood, tall, still, returned. Further back behind a row of tourists and standing slightly off to the side was Travis. Jacket zipped, hands in his pockets, no phone in sight. He didn't wave, didn't try to get Elias's attention. He just watched, not with guilt, not with pride, with peace. When the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, Elias stepped into the guardhouse. Just before the door closed behind him, his eyes swept briefly over the crowd and met Travis's. No nod, no smile, no sign. Just understanding. That was all it needed to be. And Travis. He turned and walked away. Not as the man who threw the kick, not as the viral name, but as someone who finally understood what strength really is. It wasn't a comeback story. It wasn't a redemption arc. It was a correction, a quiet one. Weeks rolled by like soft waves on a quiet lake. No headlines, no hashtags, no new controversies to fan the flames of public memory. The internet had moved on just as Travis once hoped it would, but now he wasn't clinging to that need anymore. The dojo had become more than just a business. It was a mirror, and every class reflected something new, not about his students, but about him. He had stopped chasing applause the way he used to. It wasn't that he no longer cared about recognition. It's that he had begun to understand its weight, what it costs to crave being seen, and what it means to truly show up. His lessons had changed, not in content, but in delivery. He still taught the form, still corrected stances and guided breath, but now each correction came with a question. Does this feel grounded? Are you balanced here because of force or because of trust? Parents noticed. Kids noticed. Some of the older students, the ones who'd been unsure about returning, started drifting back in, not with loud announcements or apologies, just with quiet footsteps and the tap of bare feet on vinyl. And Travis welcomed each one, not like a salesman eager for numbers, but like a man who finally understood what it meant to lead. One Friday afternoon, he received a letter. Real paper, real envelope, postmarked from London. The return name was printed small e, Mensa. Inside only one sentence. We don't get to choose the moment, but we do get to choose what kind of man we are in it. There was no signature. Travis folded the letter and placed it behind the quote on the wall. Not to hide it, but to keep it close. That evening, he closed the dojo early, stepped outside into the golden hush of late spring. The sun hung low. The pavement was warm, and he breathed not for discipline, not for performance, just because it felt good to be still. He walked to a small neighborhood park a few blocks away. It had one bench facing west, and he sat there until the sky turned from amber to deep indigo. No phone in hand, no music in his ears, just the wind and the fading warmth on his face. Somewhere kids played tag. A dog barked. A sprinkler hissed to life. Life simple and unscripted. And for once, Travis didn't feel like he was missing out. He didn't feel overlooked. He didn't feel lesser. He just felt here, at peace with the silence he used to fear. Later that week, a parent dropped off their son for the first time. The boy was tall for his age, maybe 12, nervous but curious. The mother asked quietly, "Is this the place where—" "You know the man from the video teaches." Travis looked her in the eyes and answered without hesitation. "No," he said. "That man left a while ago." She hesitated, unsure. He smiled. "But the one teaching now, he's someone I'm proud to introduce your son to." That night, the class ended with the same quiet bow it always did. No clapping, no fanfare, just breath, just presence, just strength. Sometimes the loudest thing in the world is the silence that follows a mistake. The kind that doesn't echo, it settles. And that's exactly what happened to Travis. He threw a kick to be remembered, and in doing so forgot the one thing martial arts is meant to teach us: control. But it wasn't the blow that changed him. It was what came after. The stillness, the consequences, and the quiet grace of a man who chose not to retaliate, but to stand. Lieutenant Elias Mensa didn't need to prove anything in that moment. His strength wasn't in the stumble or the walk-off. It was in the choice to let silence speak louder than any strike. In doing so, he offered a mirror to someone who desperately needed to see himself, not as he wanted to be seen, but as he truly was. We all have moments like this, maybe not on a stage, not in a palace, not with cameras rolling, but in life, in relationships, in conflicts that flare up when pride whispers louder than patience. The question isn't, will you ever mess up? The question is, when you do, what kind of person will you be next? So if this story stirred something in you, pause, reflect, and maybe share it with someone who needs that same reminder. Because strength isn't how hard you hit. It's how you carry the weight of your own actions when no one's watching.